Welcome back to the last of our regular shows for Season 1. Today we're going to discuss one more topic in detail, and then tomorrow we have a special treat for you.
Yes, we're both really excited about this. We're putting together a video of the most interesting things we have shared in the entire Season 1.
Yeah, it covers every week and touches on almost every show, but we're keeping it as tight and as fun as possible.
Honestly, as we look back and discuss this among ourselves, we've covered so much material that is kind of overwhelming.
It really is. And we realize that someone picking up the show in progress might understandably miss something that actually be really useful to them, or that anyone who's been following along as we go has probably skipped some episodes that didn't seem that relevant to them in the moment. So this video is our way of putting the most important info nuggets from every week into one place and going through them at a very high level so that you can see for yourself if there's something that you want to go back to and dig into a little bit deeper.
We're also very excited about today's show, so let's not get totally ahead of ourselves yet.
Good point. Today we're going to touch on flow in several of its manifestations. For one thing, there's conversational flow around a room during meetings, which was the unspoken bonus lesson in several of our shows this week as well as from weeks 1 and 2.
Right. Internalizing the spoken as well as nonverbal expectations of the Chinese people in general will help with gaining a deeper understanding about Chinese culture in meetings and office settings.
Exactly. There are metaphors derived from water regarding molecular cohesion and fluid movement that are fairly obvious if you're a nerd about this stuff like I am, but that certainly apply here and are worth talking about in terms of social and professional cohesion.
When approaching high-stakes business meetings in China, it also helps to think of the more modern psychological meaning of the word flow. Specifically, it's often used in Silicon Valley and other high-performance environments.
Yeah, if you study flow states, there's a lot of actionable takeaways you can gain in terms of how outsiders can best integrate with China, or how Chinese can learn to adapt to a new environment outside of their comfort zone. Bad news is, for working within a more traditional Chinese business environment, anything resembling flow is almost institutionally impossible to achieve.
Exactly. The working hours and physical office environments are typically not conducive to this. But as you said, the good news is that there are opportunities to achieve or experience flow here, even just in fleeting moments. So we will look at this as well.
Let's start by introducing an important concept in Chinese life called danwei.
Danwei essentially means unit, but in a way that it's unique to Chinese collective culture. Think of someone's office setting as their work unit.
And even with my limited knowledge of Chinese history, I know that someone's work unit traditionally defined them in the not-so-distant past.
Right. Before the reform and opening up, when two Chinese meet, if they were acquaintance, they would ask each other, 吃了吗?
Or have you eaten, as we talked about before.
Exactly. But if you're strangers and hadn't yet been introduced to each other, they would likely ask, which unit are you from? That's 你是哪个单位的 in Chinese.
And I understand that the police would lead with this question too if they need to talk to you about something. Or when a girl brought her boyfriend to the house, her mother would almost certainly ask this.
She sure would. In many ways, the unit or danwei concept can be said to have been the basis of survival for the Chinese of the recent past. For example, the production output created by units of people is a practical realization of the group consciousness mandate that underlies all school culture here.
This related to everything from how you eat, your face, the guanxi relationships you have, even your friends, families, and future. Setting aside our usual focus on modern entrepreneurial-minded Chinese for a moment, the feeling for a more ordinary Chinese working person was that if you could find a good unit, it'll provide a lifelong benefit. Things will therefore flow naturally, at least according to what people living in that reality tunnel expected.
If you understand it this way, you can see why mothers would care so much about their daughter's boyfriend's danwei. Because if he has a good one, it means that their daughter's life would be more secure. The unit and the individual, therefore, had a mutual interest in maintaining the unit's integrity and strength.
This is where some of the defensive pride you'll see related to schools, hometowns, and companies comes into play. And that's pretty universal, but we're talking about China for right now. People will consciously and unconsciously stand up for their unit's position and honor. They'll fight for its fame and fortune, fight for its face, and fight for the benefits they receive from it. Because the individual and the unit are integrated into one, they also share a face.
which is why when two Chinese people are talking together, if you want to not hurt the other person's face, it's best not to disrespect the other party's danwei. In fact, it's expected to praise others' danwei or company, hometown, school, or family, and to not make yours out as being superior.
Even if, it is.
Well, you'd never say that if you wanted to build good guanxi and maintain harmony and all the other things we learned about. It would disrupt the social flow. And disruption is a 4-letter word in China.
Speaking of that, we have one other concept to learn about on your notes there. What's that one?
No peeking.
Can't help myself. What's that mean?
This relates to finding your unit and get settled into your life. This phrase is called 安身立命.
安身立命.
Pretty good. That means that your life depends on it. Danwei are viewed like coffins in the eyes of Chinese people. No exaggeration. In old China, a little bit of saving could create a favorable coffin for you during your lifetime, so you'd know how you'd be taken care of now and in the future.
Of course, this was way more relevant during the days of the small-scale peasant economy, which guaranteed the safety and lifetime security of a person in terms of both economic sources and social psychology. Nowadays, as people leave home and wander around the world, Chinese people often seek out a family-like group for comfort. I saw this a lot when teaching in a master's program in LA, actually. Again, there were rare exceptions to this rule, but by and large, the Chinese students tended to cluster together socially and on their productions, mostly in Chinese-only groups.
I can see that.
Now, the differences between this non-random sample and the greater mainland population over a certain age were acute. These students, after all, were people who wanted to move to Los Angeles to study filmmaking, and they had the resources and level of support to do that. That's pretty significant.
Well, from a Chinese point of view, there are very logical and emotional reasons to take this approach. Since everyone is integrated, the benefits of their unit can be shared and no one will lose face. Everyone can have a share of happiness, and if there is any difficulty in the unit, everyone can share the difficulty too, and make it easier to bear.
And on the topic of bearing burdens, in times of difficulty at a company, sometimes the leader will have to ask the group, the employees, to temporarily give up and sacrifice certain personal interests as they work together to overcome the difficulties. When asked to sacrifice personal interests to help the greater good, it's said that they are recognizing the collective need. How do I say that?
识大体.
识大体, okay.
Yeah, in a philosophical sense, the individual is an essential part of the collective. Think of it as the body. If the body as a whole provides an entire system of our being and supports all the different pieces of our existence, how could we not return the favor and honor it if needed by sacrificing ourselves occasionally?
If someone subscribes to these principles, they're not allowed to have any personal opinions contrary to group integrity. To express individualism, as was discussed way back in our chats about the agrarian roots of Chinese society, that would be seen as highly disruptive to hierarchical order, which was, and is officially, prized among most all else. Now, since this is the case, obedience in the unit is the biggest principle. The idea is that this will lead to a good reputation and all that flows from that. So looking at all this from a pre-internet era, one job for life, fresher off the farm approach, the promise of a so-called iron rice bowl, meaning a stable job, a predictable quality of life, and never worrying about where your next meal is coming from, even if it's a modest, meager one, was extra tempting for generations of people. And since so many of them, hundreds and hundreds of millions, bought into this and expected to be honored, the weight of this cannot be ignored. Still, times are changing, even here.
Yes, they are. Developing strong independent personalities and exercising free will can become a more common exercise and experience for the Chinese, but it will take time. In fact, there is an old Chinese saying, 枪打出头鸟. This means the duck who makes the most noise will get shot.
That's similar to the English concept of the tall poppy syndrome. The literal meaning is that the tallest poppy plant, the one that grows higher than the others in the field, will get its head chopped off. The practical meaning is don't brag or boast or highlight your individual accomplishments in any way. Basically, be modest or else the mob will kill you. Now, this is a little bit overcooked for my taste, and my business dealings with friends down in New Zealand, for instance, where this is still really deeply felt, I've had to adjust my much more American style to kind of better sit at the table there. But being in China, it's been like 1,000 times that.
I bet it has. This is related to the idea of who gets to deliver good or bad news to, who, how, and when you do it, actually. The idea is that if you have received credit or honors, you must owe it to the collective. And if needed, you must state as much to the public. Otherwise, it would be labeled as pride or arrogance. You'll be seen as setting yourself out of the masses or having personal ambitions, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty similar.
And this relates to your entertainment world a little bit. There's a belief that the more famous you are, the more modest and cautious you should be, especially when dealing with regular people. Celebrities in China are expected to help people remain psychologically balanced and feel comfortable around them.
Yeah, it's my turn to be shocked and have no official comments here.
I can tell you that it's widely true in China. But you know what's funny?
You mean what else?
Marvel and DC movies are hugely popular here.
Right.
Why do you think Chinese people like to watch American-style hero movies?
Well, I've talked about this for hours in industry-specific interviews, including on CGTN here multiple times over the years. So what do you think? If you start, then I can kind of fill in the gaps.
To me, I guess those themes are resonating with them in a deep mind, telling them that they are in need of finding that heroism within themselves.
I like that. I think it's a fairly solid universal experience. For me, I'd say that the main reasons that these things translate are that those movies have among the highest levels of technical and artistic craft in terms of the things that easily translate. You know, things like the writing, the directing, the picture, sound, visual and practical effects, and the editing. Not always the acting, but that can be good too. It's getting better. Now, those are especially attractive when compared to movies that aren't as technologically accomplished or ambitious or as cohesively finished. The level of Chinese films here has really increased, but it's still playing catch up a little bit.
That makes sense. But how about on a deeper level?
Okay, thematically, they speak to an individual kind of heroism like you mentioned, one that usually has the premise that you have it within yourself to do things that are ambitious, maybe crazy, or even seemingly impossible if you dig as deep as you can and try your best. Again, that's you, as in one single person you. Working with allies, yes, and with a type of hierarchy and leadership structure, but it's a group of individuals who are bonded naturally as a cohesive band. Each of them owns their own responsibilities, and they work together with their strengths being recognized as theirs to deploy, right? It's not like a group of roughly interchangeable functionaries under the direction of a brilliant leader who's the sole point of clarity and knowledge, somebody who has to be blindly followed into battle and kowtowed to. We're not really into that, you might have noticed. People who've learned to think for themselves reject that premise internally by default and externally if they can. But if you can't do that societally, then movies allow people to live vicariously. That's why.
Appreciate it, Brendan.
Okay, as we wrap up today, I need to make a confession. That whole giant chunk of commentary I just dropped was created in a flow state. Because I've thought so much about this and talked about it and been asked about it so much in various ways, I was able to kind of just turn on the faucet and let that flow out onto the mic and drown everybody.
I think you all worked out, and you definitely answered my question.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I'll admit that sometimes that type of flow needs a hand on the faucet to moderate it. But for my money, it better be my hand doing the turning, you know what I'm saying? Or at least one that I've given agency to help me, not one that's externally mandated.
Well, a truly strong leader invites different opinions while fostering fairness. So that sounds about right to me. And more to the theme of our shows this week. That is why places like Silicon Valley can be so successful in terms of creativity that changes the world.
In the best of cases, they sure can. Creating the proverbial win-win requires that everyone first agree on what the rules of the game are, or at least that they understand what game each other is playing, and then try to find common ground wherever possible.
If you want progress, there really is no other way to achieve it than to be honest about this. And then to act smartly and accordingly.
Well said. So tomorrow we'll be releasing that special video we talked about that recaps the best of Season 1.
We have worked hard to get all the biggest concepts and the best tips in there as we could, and to make it good and fun. So we hope you really enjoy it.
So we'll see you tomorrow, then take a break and kick off 2019 with some really great guests to make it even more useful to you. For now, I'm Brendan Davis.
And I am Yingying Li. We'll see you tomorrow on video on How China Works.